Hey folks, Pat here. Welcome back to the Midland. Today I've got something a little bit different for you. Since most of the building's been done and most of our schedule's been bulked out, we're just kind of making tweaks now until we build the Southern Division, and that will be a new series that I've already cut the video where we build down to the ironworks, and so that will be kind of similar to what we've done in the past. But now that we're kind of settling in here a little bit, and the devs are tinkering with the inputs and the outputs on all the industries, it's time to just kind of run for a little bit. And so I decided that we'll do like I don't know, maybe like 30-minute sessions here where I just kind of run the railroad and we'll talk about trains in general. And so train talk radio or something like that. I haven't decided what to call it yet. But for today, let me kind of walk you through what I kind of have in mind here, since I just fired this up on a nice quiet afternoon. And we are in the process right now where we have 2 mine trains. This one's an empty, and I just brought this one in not too long ago, but I've decided to actually break this mine train here up. And so we'll use a bunch of the cars for the Southern Division run, because they'll need lumber and beams and all kinds of stuff. And so rather than just buy new cars, we're going to have 3 trains, 1 train there, which will be that train that runs down there. This train that I'm standing on, this is the mine train, the iron mine train, and this train over here, which is the coal mine train. And so we have to do a little bit of rebalancing, but we have to do a little bit of switching first. Let me count up and see what I got over here, because I think I had this idea that, because I'm playing on realistic and hard settings, so realistic physics and then the hard industry, which means that, let's just do the math here real quick, and then we'll start talking about some of the things that I want to talk about. So let's see, we got 4 coal cars, and so to fill each one of these up, all right, so to fill one of these up, we need 4 beams and 6 lumber, right? No, we need, so it's, oh my gosh, the math makes my brain hurt. They should just do it by carload, for crying out loud, but whatever. I'm not complaining, guys. It's just mental math is not my thing. So anyway, let's see. So to fill one of these up, it takes, on hard settings, it's going to take 4 lumber and 2 beams, right? Yes, because it's 1 beam, 2 lumber on normal settings. So on hard settings, it's 4 beams or 4 lumber and 2 beams. Okay. So to fill up an entire car, it's 8 lumber and 4 beams, right? Yes. Okay. Yes, to fill up an entire car. So the ratio on this is, what is that? It's 2, 4, 6, 12. 12. It is 1, 2, 3, 4 cars loaded 50-50, okay, to fill up half. So it's 4 cars loaded up 50-50 to load 1. So that's a 5. And so we need 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of these and 16 of these, right? Yes. 4 of these, 16 of these, loaded half and half. I think I did the math right. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4 beams, 1 lumber, 5 beams, 2 lumber, 3 lumber, 4 lumber, 6 beams, 7 beams, 8 beams, 9 beams, 5, 6 lumber, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up there. Okay. So what do we need? We need 1 more lumber car. Correct? So it'll be 16 and 4, half and half. Yeah. Well, we'll be off just a little bit, but that's okay. All right. So we need to grab the crummy over here and 1 lumber car, run up to the mill real quick, load it up with lumber, and then bring it back down here. So let's grab Betsy and do that. All right, so that's enough math. I probably jacked it up, but I think it's pretty close. So that's okay. Oh wait, let's check our fire. Her, of course, she's gone cold. Betsy's been here for a little bit, so that's okay. That should do. How's our water? Water is fine. All right, off we go. Oops. Oh no, that's what we want. We want cars from over there. And like usual, do our moves from the cab here. Try not to derail nothing. Which we're about to do right off the bat. Try not to run through any switches today. So let's see, we do want to go up the lead eventually. And we want to come down onto yard 3, or yard 2 there. So just doing the initial setup here for the day. And then topics that I kind of wanted to like cover. So like when people find out that I work for a railroad, like the number one question I get is like, how do I get a job on a railroad? And so I figured we'd talk about that a little bit today. Just because it's a little bit easier to do now than it used to be. But I'll kind of walk you through the process, the different type of gigs that are out there, stuff like that. Actually, I think I talked about that a little bit in a previous video, so if you didn't watch that one all the way through, or if you did, I'll try not to repeat myself on that one too much. And then, again, if you have suggestions for things that you want to know a little bit more about, or things that I saw, stuff like that, things that you're curious about, or if you have stories to share, that'd be great too. Because there are a few communities out there that are focused on former railroaders, but they seem a little insular to me, meaning that they're not really made for people who are not former railroaders. So people get kind of like, I don't know, a little bit... I don't think the word is jealous, but they guard like the things like the terminology and things like that, and then they kind of like it's like, oh well, you're a modeler, so that's fine. We could actually talk about model railroads too quite a bit, because I was a modeler before I actually started working for the railroad, which is kind of rare, unless you do it as a kid, and I guess I did a little bit of that, but hiring process for the railroad is a little bit. It's probably changed since I was there, since it's been decades. Well, not that many decades, but... And a lot of things don't change on the railroad, but I did do a lot of hiring when I worked there. Mostly for train crew, but not always. So we would hire occasionally. You get a decent job, like a station clerk job would come up. Or one of the jobs that we had that was probably the most unique one that came up while I was working there was in our yard we had actually what were called control operators. And control operators were trained as dispatchers, but they were just responsible for dispatching, for controlling movements within the yard. We had a rather extensive screening process for that job because those are the kind of jobs that once people get their hands on them, they never ever give them up. We were very specific on that one about not actually pulling someone internally. And so that's one of the things that you need to understand about the railroad is that they are very reluctant to pull people from jobs internally. And so if you get a job on the railroad, you're probably going to do that job forever. So now there's ways around that, but it's kind of rare. But the whole reason why we decided we really wanted to hire somebody who was external, so meaning fresh, was so that they wouldn't have seniority. And so if you mark up on the railroad, well, if you get hired, all right, so first you get hired, and you get hired into a job, so like a trainman or a carman or something like that. Almost all of those kind of blue-collar, non-managerial, non-professional, like accountants and stuff, lawyers and crap like that. All those jobs in there are part of what we call a craft. And so when you get hired into the railroad, you essentially sign up, which we call markup, in a particular craft, and you're going to spend 6 months to a year doing that job, basically as a journeyman, or probie. So it depends on the railroad, they call it different things. But then once you get past your probationary period, we call that your derail. Once you get past your derail, you mark up into a union, and then at that point in time, the minute you do that, you establish a seniority date. And unlike a lot of the other unions that I've dealt with, railroad unions are kind of unique. I've done a lot with Teamsters and machinists and stuff like that outside of the railroad. But inside the railroad, everybody has a seniority date, and you live and die by your seniority date. And in most cases, if you decide to go outside of your craft, so you decide to transfer outside of it, you want to become a manager, you want to go into a professional job or something like that, you want to go into sales, marketing, customer service, whatever, you can actually maintain your seniority date after you leave the union. Now, it costs you money, but what that means is if you jump into something like customer service or sales or management, you can actually at some point in time turn around and say, F that, I don't like my new job, I want to go back to my old one, and guess what? The railroad has to let you do it. Now, the railroad does not like this. So, for obvious reasons. It means that you can go around and test out different jobs. All right, and so when we look for, or in this case, when we were looking for a control operator, we did not want somebody who actually had seniority in craft. And so we had to go through this entire process where we basically screened out every internal candidate who said that they were interested in the job. We found little nitpicky ways to disqualify them from the job. Now, this is managerial BS. I totally admit to that. But at the same point in time, it's common. That wasn't my idea to do things that way. It was the way that I was told to do them. So, long story short, when you mark up in a railroad, the job that you get initially is probably the one that you're going to have for a long time. And so be very careful about that. All right. There are exceptions to that, like I said. And so if you started out as a trainman and then used your, I don't know, mysteriously found free time to go to community college and get your diesel certificate, then yeah, you could jump over to the engine shop really easily, and they'd be happy to have you. But if you decided, well, I'm going to use my mysteriously acquired free time to study accounting and then decide that you want to go corporate and be an accountant for the railroad, they're not going to like that if you come in as a trainman. They'd rather have someone fresh off the street, because then they can beat on that person a little bit. That person doesn't have the opportunity to actually mark back up on their seniority. And jack up all the pools and stuff like that, because you still can accrue seniority. It just depends on the actual contract. So like some of the contracts you can't do that. But most of the trainman ones you can. And again, that might have changed in the last 15 to 20 years since I really had to dive into contracts and things like that on the railroad. But it is a thing, and so beware of that. The job that you decide to mark up for is probably the one that you're going to take. The other piece of information that you must take into consideration if you're going to go work on the railroad is that the location in which you hire out in is probably the location in which you're going to retire. Okay, now there are instances where people can get transfers, but it's not like other companies. Like if I work for Walmart and if I want to transfer to a different town, they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, if you work for the railroad and you hire out in a location that's really difficult to hire people in, meaning it's like rural, it's out in the middle of nowhere, something like that, and then you suddenly decide, well, actually, I want to live in the city, they will not approve that transfer. So you will have to fight tooth and nail in order to get that transfer, because they do not want to see somebody who's really hard to hire in a location where it's really hard to hire transfer to one where it's actually pretty easy to hire, and that would be most of your urban locations. And so, just for an example, with a place that I'm familiar with, Denver. So, this was before Denver got stupidly expensive, and there were a lot of opportunities, not just on the railroads, but different between competing railroads. So they had the BNSF, they had the UP there. And so it was really easy to hire, find people who wanted to work in Denver. It was not so easy to find people who wanted to hire out and say like Alliance, Nebraska. And so we would learn, or I would learn this, rather unfortunately, in some cases, that a lot of people would say all the right things and look great on paper, interview well, and say that they were committed to moving to, say, Alliance, Nebraska, when in fact they wanted to work in Denver. And so we would hire said people in Booneyville, USA, wherever that was. And then 6 months later, once they were past their derail, instantaneously we would get, oh, I want to transfer back to where my family is, because I actually didn't move my family out here. I just told you that I did that. This naturally pissed management off, and so they're wise to that now. Don't try and pull any of that stuff. I'm going to put Betsy down here on number 2 because we're going to break up this train here, and so don't do that. All right, so if you really want a job on the railroad, they are absolutely positively, you can find them out there. You just have to go where they need you, and you got to commit to that. All right, because otherwise you'll be 6 months, you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to put in my transfer and this is going to work. They are totally 100% wise to that, and they will not let you do it. So, because that transfer has to be signed off by at least your local divisional train master, usually your superintendent, and the superintendent will instantaneously say no to that. So, you can beg, you can borrow, you can steal, things like that. But if you're in a location where it is difficult to find trainmen, or whatever it is that you hire out as, the superintendent will say no. Promise you. That is something that I guarantee you has only gotten worse since I worked there. So, all right, let's see, what's our time at? We're at 16 minutes? Yeah, let's go ahead and run the mine train here real quick. We'll just head up the hill, because now I've got, what is this? This should be 20 cars here on the wheels. So 16 flats, 4 hoppers, 21, lucky 21 with our crummy back here, good old number 3. And so let's run this. All right. Other things about hiring out on the railroad, questions that I've gotten in the past. So I've helped quite a few people actually get jobs on the railroad, and I have to say that most of them have turned out to disappoint me. Not because they're bad people or anything like that. They just didn't listen. And so there's one guy in particular, and he was asking me for years, and he was a friend of mine at the bar. And he, good solid worker, good dude, very good with his hands mechanically and stuff like that. But he wanted to be a conductor. And this was, I believe, on CSXT, if I'm not mistaken. That was the location where he wanted to go. Well, they had location. I think both CSXT and the Norfolk Southern were hiring in the location where he wanted to go. And so I told him all this. So I was like, look, man, you're going to hire out where you want to die, so to speak, or you want to retire at least. And so don't do that. He was like, yeah, Pat, that's cool. I was like, all right, sweet. You need to be ready to work whenever they tell you to work if you're going to be a trainman. Well, actually, most of the crafts are like that. But if you're in the diesel shop, if you're Carmen, not so much if you're a signalman, but if you're either one of those two, you usually have shifts. You'll hire out in a terminal that's large enough where they have 24/7 operations, so they usually work 12-hour shifts, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. You don't get like the traditional, like usual 40-hour work week in most of those jobs, because they can force you to work overtime. Because one thing to understand is the railroad is not governed by FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act. It's governed by the union contracts. And so you're like, whoa, well, anything more than 40 hours, they can't make me work. That's not true on the railroad. So we can absolutely make you work, okay, because the union contract supersedes federal law in these cases. And in fact, in most cases, it actually predates it. So you have to do that, and you have to keep that in mind. So I think our car guys worked like 12-hour shifts. I think they worked like 8 days on and 4 days off or something. It was something weird like that. Our mechanics had a different contract. I think they were actually on 8-hour shifts. I think they actually had like basically a fairly normal 8 to 5. Well, they had, you know, like day swing and graveyard shifts. But yeah, I mean, there were enough of them where you could you could eventually, if you worked there for probably like 5, 6 years, 10 years, you could probably hold whatever you wanted because there was enough churn within those jobs. Train crews are completely different. So, and BNSF is going through a little bit of labor dispute right now, which is wholly deserved. Based upon the fact that the railroads really do a good job of treating train crews like crap. They do get paid, which is kind of the thing, but think of them as like expensive truckers. So, well, I don't know. Actually, truckers are probably more expensive than train crews now. But anyway, what that means is that you're going to be working whenever they call you. And so most of the time you have like what's called a call time to train depart, meaning that usually you have like 90 minutes. It depends on the location. If you're in an urban location, it's less. If you're in a rural location, it's more. This is way too fast. We don't want to crash. But it means that you have a crew caller, they give you a call because you work a pool or a board. Actually, that's worthy of an entire like day of explaining how those work. So I'll hold off on that because that would take easily more than the next 10 minutes here. And then you have like, I think in my territory it was 60 minutes. You had 60 minutes to report to work. And so you could be at home, you could be halfway asleep, you could be, you know, getting ready for your kid's birthday party, whatever, doing, you know, trying to live your life, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call and you got to drop everything, grab your grip. Your grip is your kit of stuff, changes of clothes, flashlights, batteries, extra radio batteries, tools, warm clothes, all kinds of stuff. That's your bag, your grip, and off you go, regardless of what you had planned for that day. Now you can lay off. All right, you're allowed to do that so many times within what's called a half, and so train crews get paid. Most of them, I think they get paid twice a month, and so it's not like bi-weekly. So it's not like every Friday, every other Friday, or something like that. It's semi-monthly, so every half month. I think the military's that way too, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I wasn't in the military. I know a lot of people who are, but and I know a lot of you are too. So, but the railroad's a little bit different than the military for sure. It's kind of interesting because there's a lot of things that are in the military that were actually in the railroad first. So, because the Army didn't really get serious about being the Army until after World War II, or maybe World War II, and virtually all of your work rules on the railroad predate World War II by a long margin. So, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So anyway, if you're going to be train crew, you can lay off a couple times every half. I think in where I was working, if you did it more than 4 times, it might have been 4 times and a half. So that's 4 guaranteed days off every 2 weeks, roughly. So it tried to kind of line up with that. But the thing is that, actually no, it was 4 every month. So it was only 2 guaranteed days off every half. And so if a month is 30 days, a half is 15, just even it all out, you got 2 to 3 days off every half, or 4 to 6 days off a month. And so BNSF's trying to do something kind of similar to that. They're just trying to like make it, because here's kind of the thing, all right, that a lot of people don't realize is like, you can be an attendance problem on the railroad, and your train master can't really do that much to you. So, I mean, you can lay off, and all you have to do is just say, no, I'm not coming to work, and it's really damn hard to fire you. And so we would have guys who would easily lay off the entire half, and, you know, they'd find ways to get around it, FMLA, stuff like that, which I don't have any problem with FMLA. It's absolutely legit for the people who need it and stuff like that. But or you'd find people who, I mean, they would just figure out how to play the system, so in some respects, and that kind of became a game within its own right. Anyway, there's that track there that goes down to the ironworks. I have that video in the can. We will stitch that one together here into a video here pretty quick. But it was pretty common to have people who got conveniently sick, who had relationships with local doctors and stuff like that, who would actually write them notes, yada yada yada, all kinds of different stuff. And so attendance is kind of a game, but it's balanced by how much you want to work. All right, because you don't get a guarantee. I mean, some people get a guarantee, like some of the older heads would have a guaranteed board where they're guaranteed a certain level of pay regardless of how much they work. But most of the boards, they've ditched that long ago, and so the guarantee, or if they do have a guarantee, it's like really low, so it's like below minimum wage kind of guarantee, or definitely less than when you'd get off welfare or something. But again, that's all going to be dependent upon the territory that you work in. So some territories have remarkably generous contracts, and some of them have extremely stingy contracts. It just depends on how well the local... I mean, there's not like a national contract that governs like an entire Class 1 railroad. It's actually quite a few different little contracts that are spread out over the entire thing, and then what happens is the railroad and the union, it might be the BLET or the UTU or something like that, they kind of play, you know, picky-choosy, and they, you know, oh, I'll trade you this for that every time the contracts come up for negotiation, and sometimes they'll affect different locations in different ways. It's really complicated. I've never seen a place... I mean, it was so funny when I started working with the railroad, I was used to airline contracts. And so an airline contract would say, like, the machinist union would fit in like a pocket, you know, kind of like notebook kind of thing. On the railroad, I was like, first time I got there, I was like, well, let me go read the contract. And everybody laughed. Everybody in the room laughed at me. And, you know, the superintendent pulls me to the side and he says, all right, you want to see the contract for this one union in your terminal? And it was like 3D ring binders. It was crazy. So, he's like, you're going to have to read all this. He's like, that's why we got lawyers, man, who do all this stuff. And so does the union. Now, your local union president would kind of know that contract pretty well. Hopefully. Otherwise, you shouldn't elect that dude. But, you know, sometimes that's a popularity contest, too. And this is still pretty tough haul here, even without the cordwood cars. So, but all of that would essentially just... kind of boil down to the fact that the unions are complicated, and so being a trainman, you know, even though they got these attendance policies and things like that, you could usually get away with a certain level of shenanigans as long as you weren't the guy who was doing it the most. If you were the guy who was doing it the most and you couldn't justify it, we would absolutely try and bird dog you. So, and bird dogging means that you've got the superintendent on you, you've got, you know, the train master's going to come after you, roadmaster's going to come after you. They're going to watch you like a hawk just to try and see if you actually jack something up so that we can actually fire you. Because it did take a lot of effort to actually fire somebody on the railroad. They had to do something really stupid. So it'd have to be like, you really got somebody hurt bad. You laid off way too much. Yeah, we are trying to stall here, but I think we're going to be okay. So you lay off too much, or you got a Rule G, and a Rule G is a substance abuse violation. And that was far more common than anybody would like to see, but it did happen quite a bit. And so, so just keep all that stuff in mind. So that when you sign up, you're kind of walking into, when you mark up, because that's what we call it, when you mark up, you're kind of walking into this very complex and complicated set of work rules that's not very simple, and so you're not going to be able to kind of like look at it from the outside and, oh, okay, let me do some career planning. No, if you hire out in a place, pick the job you want, pick the location that you want. If you can't get a job there, it's just not going to happen. If there's a job you want, then don't be picky about location. If there's a location you want, then don't be picky about job. Regardless of that, as long as you keep kind of that in mind, you'll be okay. And so my friend, who I was talking about way back there, the engine house, picked his location, got his job that he wanted, and then suddenly decided that he didn't want to work that hard. He thought I was BSing him about that. But no, they're going to call you. You're going to be busy. You're going to miss football games. You're going to miss soccer practices. You're going to miss, you're going to miss a lot of things if you plan on having a family. But you'll be able to support that family extremely well. And so that's the trade-off there for working for the railroad. Now, we're going to have to watch the next couple weeks, see what happens with BNSF. All right, so Warren Buffett's private train system, private train set plays by a slightly different set of rules because it's a private company. And so they do a lot of stuff. The Big Nasty, the FNBS, all the Class 1s have nicknames. Those were the common ones for BNSF. And they do play by a slightly different set of rules. And so some of these guys there might be a lot of job opportunities if they do strike. I have seen strikes. They're not common. They're rarely publicized. Usually they only last a day or two, stuff like that. But, having half the workforce try and strike on the BNSF, it's not exactly this wild trump card that the BLET thinks it has on the railroad. All they'll do is use that as an excuse to institute one-man crews, or like UP over the last couple of years has been just like hiring contractors like crazy to do all this stuff that union craft jobs used to do in the past. So like inspections, locomotive inspections, track inspections, detector cars, all kinds of stuff. And so, that's kind of the way that things are going. So if you want to work as a contractor, there's tons of opportunities out there right now. Then you can kind of write your own ticket. But you have to be willing to take what they're willing to pay you. And so that's probably problematic too. And you kind of undermine the union when you do that as well. And that's not very cool. And that's not because I'm some kind of honk for the unions here. I've been in a union. I've been a shop steward. I've been a committee chair. I've done a lot of stuff over the years in unions. And unions are great to a certain level. But I got to tell you something. The one thing that a lot of people just aren't on board with, especially early in their career, is the whole seniority system. That it's cancerous. It turns you into a bad person after a while. It doesn't turn you into a bad person, but you have kind of like this different attitude towards work that is definitely problematic. And you get trapped into, like jobs where you can't necessarily do what you want to do. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall for that one. Even though I wasn't even in the union at the time. But that's okay. Just understand what you're kind of getting into. There are a lot of other jobs in the railroad that you can go after. Dispatcher jobs are out there, so they're much harder to come by. You got to watch the railroad's websites. Whenever you see something posted on the website, that means they've actually gone through all the internal candidates that they usually want. And so, but sometimes that's just also like, oh, okay, well, we got to dot all our I's and cross all our T's, and so let's go ahead and throw out the public posting there as well. And so if you don't hear back, it doesn't mean you're a bad candidate. It just means that, they're just doing HR BS like usual. This is a gorgeous bridge right here. I think every time I cross this thing, I have to come here and look at the shadow. So, anyway. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and let's get a new screenshot in here. No, that might not work here today. There we go. That one's really nice. Bam. It's kind of like the scenic point on the railroad. The actual Midland had one of those too at Hagerman Pass. It was called Hellgate. Kind of cool, where all the trains would stop there and everybody would get out and take a picture. So, but anyway. Yeah, there are a lot of other different types of jobs you can get out there. So, professional jobs, like if you're an attorney, they'll hire you. They're always looking for attorneys, but all those professional jobs, you're going to have to move to wherever HQ is. So, yeah, that's different for every Class 1 railroad. What is it? BNSF is in Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. UP's in Omaha. CSXT is in Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken. And is it Norfolk Southern in Atlanta? You guys can correct me on those. I don't remember. There's only one of those that I'm positive about. Well, actually, no. There's two of those that I'm positive about. I didn't spend much time with. I didn't work for an Eastern railroad. I worked for a major Western railroad, just to narrow it down a little bit. But I did interface with Well, only a few guys on the CSXT, not so much on Norfolk Southern. But yeah, if you're going to do a corporate thing, that's where you're going to go. Tips if you want to hire out as a trainman, tell them that you're very trainable, that you can do whatever you're told, that you won't question authority, that you don't have any kids, so, that you've never gotten hurt on the job. What else? Yeah, that you don't really have a life, or your hobbies consist of things that you can do on your own time. So don't tell them that you like to go rock climbing, or that you are a huge football fan and must catch your favorite team on every Saturday or Sunday. Those are all huge red flags that we would absolutely flush you for. Yeah, don't volunteer any of that information. So, if you're ex-military, that's great. I don't want to see your DD-214. I don't want to hear about your disability. So, because I guarantee you there will be discrimination against you in those, and you will never be able to prove it. They are way too smart. They'll get away with it every single time. But if you show up, you got a leg brace or something like that, absolutely, you're not going to get hired. If you show up in the parking lot and you got DV plates, you're not going to get hired. Brutal stuff, guys. Absolutely brutal, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat straight up here because I don't work there anymore. And I wouldn't go back either. But those are the truths. Yeah. So you want to be healthy, uncommitted, and eager to learn stuff. If you bring that magic combo, you will get hired. You will make it past the interview process with flying colors. So we need to pull up probably no farther than this here, and that'll do, I believe. Oh, still rolling? Nah, perfect. Alright, let's see. Not too shabby. Alright, well, I'll go ahead and do the loading and unloading here. So that's the boring stuff. We're about at the 30-minute... Oh, we're past the 30-minute mark. So I've enjoyed talking with you here today. Hope you know, maybe learned something a little bit, or at least thought of some questions to ask or something like that. But we're just going to do some straight-up operations here in the next couple videos like this until I get more of the track in at the Southern Division and we get a chance to test out some new trains. I'm also building a new cordwood train. Haven't quite decided what to do with that, whether I'm going to originate it out of the smelter or up at the log camp. Have to think about that a little bit. So if you have any thoughts on that, you know where to drop those. And likewise, any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, I love them all. And so please, you know where to put those as well. In the meantime, if you want to keep up with the channel, you know what to do. But that's all I got for you today. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. We'll catch you all again here real soon. Take care now. Bye.